Hello, this is a quick video to help you make the most out of your learning resources. Now, you might be thinking by the time you see this, you're already a year or longer into your course, that you don't need to think about these things, that you already know what you're doing. But please persevere. It's not a very long video, and I hope the things I've talked about here are going to make more sense of the way in which we present information and the way in which we interact through study. So this is all based on a lifetime of learning experience, as well as an awful lot of research that other people have done that I've read and absorbed and processed. So it's not coming out of nowhere, and it's also underlies the design principles and the way in which we set out materials and we set out the course. So the first thing I want to mention before I talk about specific resources is the idea of active learning. A lot of research on this, and there's a distinction between passive attempts to learn, which often involves things like listening to lectures, even reading a book, whatever, versus active learning, where you're actually doing something. And the empirical evidence is very strong. Active learning is much more effective. And in fact, it's very easy to get distracted and to sort of phase out with those passive forms. And active learning not only is a good way of integrating learning into what you do, but it also helps keep your attention on the task as you do it. So what this often takes the form of is things like note-taking. And when you're listening to a video, make some notes about it. When you're reading a book, make some notes. Yes, highlighting can serve some of these functions as well, but generally speaking, as you start to phase out, you end up sort of highlighting more and more things. You may have had the same experience where you end up basically colouring in the book, the thing you're reading after a while, because you get disconnected from the process. So actually being active, actually writing something down, not only helps you absorb and make sense of information, but it also helps you focus and retain focus on the task ahead. This is also one of the reasons, which I'll come back to, why PowerPoint is such a monumentally bad thing. The research has been done, the empirical evidence has been done. PowerPoint is shockingly bad on every level. And one of the reasons why it's bad is it kind of lulls you into the idea that you've taken notes because you've got these set of notes that someone else has taken. But A, you haven't actually, there's no guarantee just because you've got some PowerPoints that you're actually going to read them. And B, you actually haven't gone through that process of making sense, contextualizing, locking the information in certain ways. I'll come back to PowerPoint in a little while because it's one of my least favorite things in the world. All right, so active learning is good. That means active note-taking, and it also means actively being involved in problems. Sometimes texts or things will give you little side points and say, here's something to think about. Don't skip those over. Those are done as waypoints for you to actually integrate the knowledge you've been reaching at that point and actually think about it. And this goes doubly for tutorial problems. Make sure you prepare ahead. Make sure you engage in tutorials. If you're just a lurker in a tutorial, you may as well not be there, really. You might as well just save yourself the time, do something fun. It's only through actually engaging and actually making sense of problem solving and getting involved that you actually learn and you actually retain that knowledge. All right, so let's look at some of the resources that you have to work with. You have videos, you have study guides, you have texts and readings, you have workshops, and you have other forms of contact. And I want to just briefly touch on each of these ones. Like I said, I don't want to make this into an epic saga. The first thing is videos. What are the point of these videos? Well, in the old days, back in the old days before the internet, lectures were really the primary way of transferring information, and students just madly wrote down everything a lecturer said. And the way to get the information from the lecturer's notes to the students was just to write down everything they said in the lecture. Not a very effective way of doing things. But that doesn't mean that lectures and lecture videos are pointless. Far from it. We've refined the idea of the video to the point where we've found, and your mileage may vary, but we've found that this is a really good way to introduce someone to a topic, to provide a top-level view of a particular part of a topic, and to organise the sort of knowledge schema of what you're about to approach. Okay, this thing has 3 parts. There's A, B, and C, and these are the parts, and these are how they relate together. This ties directly into the study guides that we use at CQU. Not everyone uses them. I think ours are pretty much the best I've seen. But the lecture is basically a top-level introduction to the study guides. So when you come back and go to the study guide, you have the basics in place. You know how it all works, so then you can drill down and focus on detail. And we then have a relationship between the study guide and the text, because the study guide, if it's working the way it needs to, gives you a way into the text and an ability to understand the text as well. So we've got a sort of a tier approach happening there. So videos are designed to be friendly, introductory, help you get your head around a topic. A lot of students have told me that they listen to them in the car or on public transport or doing the housework. As a result, I don't personally put any effort into putting in titles and pictures and whatever. I used to do that sort of stuff, but so many students said, well, no, it's not really worthwhile. I only listen to it anyway. And I figure, well, that's fair enough. These are not high-level documentaries or anything else. These are just designed to get you into the topic the first time around. And you may notice that I don't use PowerPoint in these videos. Well, as I said, the empirical research has been done. PowerPoint is very bad. It doesn't add to learning. The original technology of PowerPoint was really designed because of those face-to-face lectures, and because if you were having trouble understanding what someone was saying, you can't rewind a live lecture, and PowerPoint provides another way of sending that information across. We have study guides for that, so again, PowerPoint is useless. Or the use that it used to have is being filled in some other way. But also, PowerPoint is really bad for fooling yourself into you have done more learning than you have. And there's real evidence that people don't use PowerPoints. They just collect them, and at the end of the term they still haven't read them before they go into assessment or exams or whatever. But they give this sort of false sense of security. Oh, I know that topic, I've got the PowerPoints for it. So we can talk about PowerPoint at more length in another environment. I can also tell you how the Challenger space shuttle disaster was caused by PowerPoint. There's an interesting story. But that's why, if you're saying, well, how come these lectures don't have PowerPoints embedded in them? Well, there's no real purpose for it. And if you want to take notes from the lectures, from the study guide, from your reading, do your own notes. That is going to be how you learn. That's how your brain connects, absorbs, makes sense of, contextualizes knowledge. So that's the lectures. That's the one reason why we don't do like hour-long lectures. The research on YouTube says people only watch YouTube videos for 7 minutes. We make ours a bit longer because, honestly, if you actually are doing the housework and you've got to keep changing videos every 7 minutes, it's going to be pain. So we tend to make ours about 20 minutes to half an hour. In which point we've probably run out of steam and said most of the things we need to say. But part of that is we don't want to take up too much of your time too, because these really are a prelude to getting in and making sense of the next stage. So the next stage are the study guides. As I said before, not everyone does these. CQU, I think, so CQU Law does a really good job of these. They're not perfect because they're basically, rely on staff writing them as they go, although we do improve them each term as we use them. And these are designed to be your next stage on from the lecture, to drill into the information in more detail. Not all the detail that you're ever going to need, but enough to get that knowledge in the right order, to actually get your notes together. And that is the lead into the text. And this is another one of my bugbears. This is you listening to me whinge about things. In general, law textbooks are not good. In fact, they are pretty bad. Why do I say this? Because the idea of a textbook in other disciplines is to take a novice who has no knowledge of a topic, and to introduce them to all the parts of the topic, the subtopics, the definitions, and to lead them through, take their hand, lead them through a topic till they understand it. Law textbooks don't do that. There are a couple of exceptions, but generally speaking, what we call textbooks in law are reference books. They're aimed at collecting all the most accurate, up-to-date information at the date of publication, of course, and put them all into one place. You may have noticed this. You may have struggled with a textbook where you've read the introductory chapter and been completely puzzled by it because it sort of presumes you already know the topic before you start reading it. You are not alone. Myself, as an established law academic with decades of experience, I often find when I come to a new topic and I pick up a law textbook, I look at it and it's just like, well, you clearly know what this is all about, but you're not actually giving me any favours. So because of this, and because it's unlikely that we'll actually get new textbooks produced immediately, although we do have those nutshells and study guides and things that are published that are better at introducing the topic, but then you're buying two textbooks. So what we do here is we use the study guides as a more informal publication to try and bridge that gap. So the study guides are an attempt to say, okay, the textbook's not going to do you any favours here. The textbook's not going to help you with your basic concepts. So this is the next stage. This is us bridging the topic. It's building on the lecture. It's providing, references, citations, the long, difficult words to spell, all that stuff that will give you that foundation of the knowledge that you can build on. And the next stage on that is your textbook and materials. We'll sort of deal with those together. Both of these are, if it's a textbook or an article, as I said, they tend to be written assuming you're already an expert in the area. Now, with a journal article, that kind of makes sense because a journal article's audience is people who work in a field, and it kind of doesn't make sense to start a journal article with basically introducing the basics every time. That's fair enough. But I think it's less forgivable with a textbook, which is being sold on the basis of, this is a textbook, this is what it's going to teach you about the topic. And I think those cases and materials books can be even more diabolical because they can pull all these little bits out of articles and cases and legislation kind of out of context, and they don't necessarily help you understand the context in which those operate. Now, that's not universal. There are some good textbooks out there. But what I wanted to reassure you is that you as a student who's new to the area have gone down that path before. You've got a textbook, you've picked up, you've opened up the first chapter going, right, this is going to teach me all about this topic, and you've gotten halfway through and you've got, I don't know what they're talking about. Am I stupid? Am I ignorant? Is this stuff I don't need to know? Well, and generally speaking, it's not the case. It's with the fact that the textbook assumes you're already an expert in the area before you go. Big problem in legal publishing, not something I'm going to be able to solve immediately, but I hope that they will help you understand that why we have study guides as well as reading materials. Now, in terms of reading materials, textbooks and additional readings, we are conscious of the cost of these. We're conscious of the fact that the publishers are making so much money out of these things on the basis of student need. However, there is usually a pretty good second-hand market. It's worth, and even when I was a student, I lived and died on second-hand textbooks. I never bought anything new. And textbooks are useful for a few things. One is the obvious thing is they give you more detail, and they let you see a different viewpoint on a topic than what you might have gotten from your teacher. But they're just more. There's more stuff in there for you to dig into and understand. The other thing that's good about textbooks is it gives you practice reading and summarising. You say, I've been reading all my life, I don't need to practice reading. Well, we all need practice reading in a critical and academic way. So understanding how to approach a dense text, how to look for information that you need, knowing what to skim. That's a really big thing to learn about academic reading, is where you can skim through a topic and go, okay, I'm going to read through this article, this chapter very quickly first time round, and I'm going to identify what all the bits are, and then I'm going to develop my sense of priorities. I'm going to be able to, okay, I need to find out about this, and this. This whole section here, where they go off on a little side journey, a little side quest to nowhere, talking about something that only the author's interested in, I can safely ignore that. That is an absolutely vital skill. And if all you ever do rely on is other people's versions of text, it becomes so much harder when you go out into the real world. And this is also, I suspect, why some people turn to generative AI as a shortcut, because they've not developed those skills through their academic career. So, the world would be a whole lot better if the texts were more readable and more engaging and more interesting and catered to beginners. But there is something to be said to learning to persevere and learning to sort of wring the meaning out of a text that's being resistant to you. And yeah, generally speaking, when we're coming to assess people, the people we're looking at for the distinction, high distinction levels, are generally the people who have engaged with those texts on that deeper level, who understand more. All right, so there's the stuff you do by yourself. You don't necessarily have to do it all by yourself. Having a study buddy is a great thing, or a study group, a small group of people. Great idea, even in that summarise phase. Even if you meet every 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and you go over all the material you've been studying and you summarise together, and you go through the summaries that you've done at the time, and you build them together and you re-summarise them. That stuff is really great, really productive. And there is something about tasks like explaining a topic to someone else that is really, really good for understanding the topic. Now, you could explain it to your mother or your postman or your cat, but explaining it to someone who actually also has some handle on the topic is actually more productive, because you can say, okay, the rule against perpetuities is this, and they can listen and they can figure out where there's, you might not have got it quite right, or they don't quite understand how you're explaining it. So I do recommend, if you can do it, having a study buddy who's studying the same subject, who you meet up every few weeks or so. You go through your summaries and you re-summarise and you talk to each other. So that's a little intermediate thing that I haven't put in that list of resources, but because not everyone's going to be able to do it, but it is very useful to be able to do it. The next resource is what I would say is the most underused, underappreciated resource, which is workshops. The level of disengagement of students from workshops and tutorials is on a massive scale. Some academics have talked about it as an epidemic of disengagement, and everyone's complaining about this. So it's not just online students. Tutors are sitting in empty tutorial rooms on campus where students are supposed to turn up each week and there's no one there. Alright, why are we complaining about this? Because honestly, it's no skin off our nose. If we can take a book along to read in a tutorial, and because when no one turns up, we can read our book or whatever. But this is the primary place in which students get to apply knowledge and practice skills. So when students say at the end of a term on student surveys, oh, I didn't get enough feedback, and they didn't show up to any tutorials, or they didn't participate in the tutorials they showed up to, it's a bit of a smack your head on the wall kind of moment, because that is your opportunity to get feedback, is to come along to tutorials, to have a go, engage in discussions, and actually get some feedback on what you had to say. Now, I don't think any of us as academic staff are scary. I hope we're not, and it's certainly not like the academics I had when I was in law school, when they would put you on the spot and point you out and try to humiliate you in front of your peers. None of us do that. We're all here to help you out, and that is your primary way to, well, first of all, you prepare before you go in. Then you're doing your learning there, and you're actually thinking things through. And I don't mean you have to write an essay for everything, but you need to actually go more than just say, oh, well, this is a problem about nuisance. You need to actually go, well, what are the authorities? How do they apply? Write out some short notes so that when you go into the tutorial, you're actually able to engage. It also means in tutorials that even if you're not the person who's being asked, who is, engaging and discussing, you can listen to what someone's saying, and you can assess it, and you can say, okay, does that match with what I'm thinking? So the learning, is a virtuous circle. Now, it used to be much better back when tutorials were literally 10 people. This was just shortly before I went through the uni system. Massive tutorials, it is much more difficult to engage in. But I just want to encourage you to think about engaging, and to realise that just turning up, leaving your screen off, not engaging, not talking, not participating, is pretty much like not attending. So just don't attend. If you're not going to participate, don't attend. Now, I realise we've all got issues with social anxiety. Myself as well, even though I do this for a living. And this is just thing we can talk about on a lot more detail. We'll talk about neurodivergence and neurospiciness and all those sort of things. That's all very important parts of the conversation. But what I am saying is make a genuine effort with the tutorials. Make sure you prepare, try to engage, and try to get that feedback from others. And give feedback to others in that situation, because the number one issue students have with their learning is that they're not getting enough feedback. But you don't get feedback unless you participate. And sure, you can have more or less feedback on an assignment, but that's way too late. The assignment's done. We've also done empirical research where we show the vast majority of students don't even read the feedback on assignments. They just go, "Oh, what's the grade? What's the number?" Like, fair enough. So focusing on feedback through assessment, again, it's kind of backward. It's too late in the pace. Tutorials are designed to lead you up to that assessment, to give you the right sort of preparation and feedback before you go into that process. So again, active learning. Don't be a lurker. Don't be passive. Yeah, tutorials are at night. You've probably been at work all day. It just drains your energy and everything else. But this is also your only chance to get this stuff right and to benefit from that environment and to do better. All right, the last thing I want to talk about in terms of resources is contact. Getting in contact with staff and having a chat. We have various different levels of doing that. We have things like email, obviously. We have MS Teams, which is a little bit better than email because you actually get to do it in a larger group and your peers can actually discuss as well. There's, of course, there's the forums on Moodle, which are terrible, which is why I use Teams, because the Moodle forums module is the one from 2005 and it's never been updated at CQU. And again, I don't want to get sidetracked by the problems with it, but it is very hard to track conversations in the forums on Moodle. So Teams does a reasonable job of it. Yes, it's Teams and it's got its own issues, but it's a reasonable way to ask questions where you're going to get a variety of different pieces of feedback, and you're probably going to get faster feedback than just sending an email to your staff member who is usually handling a lot of different emails at that time, and email is kind of problematic. What isn't problematic, and it may be a surprise to many students, is booking in a time to come and have a chat. I don't know about others. I spend too much of my time on administrivia, in writing reports, looking at the latest policy initiatives from the gonks at the centre of the university. It's actually a really nice break to have a chat to a student. Now, they ask us to have drop-in hours, but I don't think I've ever had a student drop into my drop-in hours in the last 10 years. So what's probably more effective is for you to arrange a time to say, is there a time this week we can have a chat, and to arrange for a Zoom chat. And, if there, I will be honest with you about my timing and what's available, but I'm also being honest with you saying that it's usually quite delightful to talk to students. Much better than talking, than a lot of the, other things I end up doing. And it's quite rewarding, and it's often useful to touch base and to find out what people, need to know. So remember that as a resource. Use it intelligently, but also don't be afraid to occasionally book in time just to have a general chat about how you're going and what you think about learning generally. Don't fear that you have to have like a really specific question. Specific questions are good, but they can usually answer those via email or via Teams. But if you just generally want to talk about how things are going, can't speak for everyone else, but I'm certainly happy to be available. And if I do get to the point where I am getting overloaded and there's too many people, I'll let you guys know. I'll say, look, in the next 2 weeks I've got a lot of meetings booked in. If you have something urgent, let me know, and let me know it's urgent. Otherwise, can we pass it over for next week? So that's again something that people don't necessarily take advantage of. And a lot of people say to me, look, I'm really sorry to bother you, and I know you're busy. And it's like, well, no, this is what I do it for. This is I don't mind talking to students. Don't worry about it. And if I am busy, I will let you know, and I'll arrange a time when I'm not busy. So that's the last of them. It's actually using that interpersonal contact in a good way, whether you have a specific thing you need to find out, or occasionally touching base. Like when I used to work on campus, I used to bump into students in the corridor. We used to have chats. That was good for students. It was good for me. We don't have that opportunity online, and we don't have an easy way to replicate that. So, running out of time here. So let's briefly run through those things again. First of all, the videos. Friendly introduction, friendly top view, talk about what this week's topic is about. 2, the study guides. This is your bridge between that top level stuff and the textbook, which honestly speaking may not be written from the perspective of someone who is not already an expert in the topic. Your textbook and your readings are there to allow you to not only drill down in more detail, but also give you that experience in learning how to read these things, how to take notes, how to make the most of it, how to use your time, how to be able to speed read and skim through, all those sort of things. Then there's your workshops. Absolutely really important, but something that people are treating as kind of peripheral, as like, well, I might turn up, I might not, I might turn up and leave my screen on. And you are literally hurting yourself by not getting engaged there. Do appreciate there are other issues involved in that, but I want to have those conversations. If you're feeling really shy about speaking up, you're worried that people will laugh at you or whatever, have a chat with me in private. We'll talk about it. We'll find ways to improve that. And finally, there's that other sort of informal communication to take advantage of where you need it, and in a timely way. Don't wait until you've got a result you don't like on an assignment, when there's been something that's been niggling you all along that you could have dealt with earlier before there were consequences for it. All right, so there it goes. Happy for your feedback on this video too. If something I missed, something I should talk about, or an addendum, let me know. Otherwise, I hope this helps you in your studies, and I will no doubt see you in class.